The galaxy had forgotten the sound of war. For thousands of years, the great concord of races had ruled in peace. Blasters and blades were relics. Museums displayed old armor like shameful memories. And the word soldier was spoken with disgust. The stars had been quiet for so long that peace seemed eternal, and in that quiet humanity had been buried. They lived on a gray, cold moon called Aroth, a wasteland of iron dust and storms that screamed across the barren plains. The Concord called it the exile colony. To them, humans were violent, unstable, born from chaos. The peace-loving species had united long ago to drive humanity away after the last war, a war humans had not started, but finished too well. Generations passed. The people of Aroth built steel shelters and underground cities. They learned to live without the stars that had once been theirs. They raised children on stories of Earth, blue skies, oceans, mountains, but none alive had ever seen them. The children of exile grew tough. The storms shaped them, the cold taught them to stand close together. And in that endless iron-gray horizon they forged a new kind of strength, quiet, patient, watchful. Their leader was a man named Commander Rian Holt, tall, broad-shouldered, with the deep calm of a man who'd seen too much and still chose restraint. He had been born on Aroth, like all of them, but he carried in his blood the discipline of the old Terran forces. His grandfather had been a soldier in the last human army before exile. Every dawn, Rian stood outside the bunkers, watching the storming sky turn from black to dull red. He would whisper a line his grandfather taught him. "Under iron we endure." Most of the galaxy thought humanity was dead, or worse, extinct. Few remembered the moon, and those who did whispered that the humans were broken. They were not. They were waiting. Then, one day, the silence ended. It began as a faint echo in the void, a broken signal, distant and strange. The technicians of the Concord ignored it at first, thinking it was static. But as the signal grew stronger, panic followed. A fleet was moving across the stars, unknown, vast, and not answering any calls. The Verka Dominion, a race of living metal and fire, had come from beyond known space. They burned through systems without mercy, devouring resources, enslaving worlds. Peace treaties meant nothing to them. Diplomats were vaporized before they could speak, and the Concord, proud keepers of peace for 1,000 years, discovered they no longer remembered how to fight. Their fleets were ceremonial, their weapons decommissioned, their people didn't even know how to aim. The Council of Races panicked, their worlds fell one by one. Then someone somewhere whispered a desperate idea. There's one species that remembers how to fight. They are monsters. They are humans. And so, under an iron sky, the galaxy turned its gaze back to the exiles it had cast away. The first ship to enter Aroth's orbit in over 300 years was not human. It came trailing light, its hull cracked and scorched from battle. The battered vessel screamed through the thin atmosphere before crashing into the dunes just beyond, the mining district of Aris Basin. For hours, nothing stirred except dust storms. Then, from the wreck, 3 figures emerged. Small, fragile shapes moving through the gray wind, waving a white beacon light. They were Saren of the Kalor, Vetra of the Thal, and Arun of the Voxel, representatives of the Concord, or what was left of it. Their ship had been the last diplomatic transport to escape the destruction of their homeworlds. They had come to the one place the rest of the galaxy feared to go. The humans found them before nightfall, a recon patrol, armored in matte steel suits, faces hidden behind black visors, surrounded the aliens silently, weapons ready, but not raised. The leader, a woman named Sergeant Ela Khan, studied them for a low. A moment before speaking, "Identify yourselves," she said through her helmet speaker. Saren, trembling, lifted a small medallion engraved with the Concord emblem. "We come in peace. We seek the leader of Aroth." The humans exchanged looks, wordless. Then Isla nodded. "You'll be taken to Commander Holt." The underground command center of Aroth was carved from solid ironstone, lit by pale blue lights and humming generators. It was not grand, but every corner breathed discipline. Maps of star systems hung on the walls, though most of them were blacked out, not from censorship but from disinterest. Humanity had long since stopped looking outward. When the aliens were brought in, they stared in awe at the people around them. The humans were tall, broad, and scarred, but there was no savagery in their eyes, only quiet strength. They moved like soldiers, even those at consoles or repair stations. The air felt heavy with restrained energy. Commander Rian Holt waited in the main chamber. He wore a worn dark coat with an iron insignia at the collar, the mark of the Aroth command. His hair was silver at the temples, his eyes a clear gray like the storms outside. "You've come a long way," he said, voice calm but edged. "I didn't think the Concord even remembered we existed." Saren stepped forward, bowing slightly. "We had no choice. The Verka Dominion has reached the core systems. They have destroyed 7 worlds in less than a cycle. They do not negotiate. They do not stop." Rian listened without expression. Around him his officers watched silently. Ela, Captain Reese, Engineer Dana Voss, each one alert, wary. "The Concord has no fleets," Saren continued. "We outlawed violence. We believed peace was eternal, but the Verka, they consume everything. They are living machines built for war. We need help. We need soldiers." Rian's eyes narrowed. "You need humans." Vetra of the Thal spoke next, her thin blue skin flickering with bioluminescence as she struggled to meet his gaze. "Yes, you are the only species that has fought wars and survived them. You are the only ones who understand how to resist." For a long time no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the generators, and the faint whisper of sand against the outer walls. Then Rian said quietly, 300 years ago the Concord came to us. You stripped our ships, burned our weapons, and left us to die on this rock. You called us violent, dangerous, monsters." Arun lowered his head. "We were wrong." Rian's tone hardened. "Were you? Or are you just desperate?" Saren stepped forward again, voice breaking. "Please, billions are dying. We have no defenses, no way to fight back. You are our only hope." Rian studied them for a long moment. Then he turned to his officers. "Clear the room." When the chamber was empty, he leaned against the steel table, silent. The 3 aliens stood before him, frightened but resolute. "Tell me," he said softly, "if humanity helps you and we win, what then? Do we go back to exile, or will you try to destroy us again?" Saren's voice trembled. We cannot promise anything, but if the Verha are not stopped, there will be no galaxy left to argue over." Rian nodded slowly. "Then you understand why this is difficult." He walked toward the viewport, a thick glass wall showing the endless gray plains outside. The iron storms rolled like waves, lightning flickering through the dust. "My grandfather used to say peace is a luxury built on the bones of those who fought for it," he murmured. "The Concord forgot that. You believed you could have peace without strength. Now you come to the ones you cast out, asking us to bleed for you again." There was no cruelty in his voice, only weary truth. Vetra whispered, "You're right, but if we die, everything dies with us. Even you." Rian turned. For the first time something stirred in his eyes, not pity but purpose. He pressed a button on the console. "Captain Reese," he said, "get me a link to the Council of Settlements. I want all colony leaders connected within the hour." An hour later the chamber was filled with faces, holograms of men and women from every human outpost on Aroth. Miners, engineers, medics, former soldiers. Rian stood at the center, the 3 aliens behind him. He spoke without preamble. "You've all heard the signal," he said. "The Verha are coming. The Concord has fallen. The galaxy that banished us now asks for our help." Murmurs rippled through the holograms. One man spat. "Help them? After what they did?" A woman added sharply, "We've survived alone. Let them face their own mess." Rian raised a hand. "I understand how you feel. But listen to me. If the Verha conquer the stars, they won't stop at the Concord. They'll come for every planet, every moon. Aroth included. We can hide in the dust for a while, but not forever." He let that sink in, then continued, his voice steady and deep. "Our ancestors fought for survival. They were called monsters for it, but what they really were protectors, builders, warriors of purpose. The galaxy feared what it didn't understand, our strength, our will. It called those things evil. Now those same things are what it needs. He turned slightly toward the aliens. We will help, but on our terms. Humanity fights for freedom, not conquest, not politics. If we stand again, it will be to protect everyone, not to serve your counsel. Saren bowed her head. Anything, whatever you need. Rian looked around the room. Then it begins. Rebuild the armories, wake the forges, reactivate the shipyards. We may be forgotten, but we are not gone. The galaxy will remember us. He ended the transmission, then looked out once more at the iron storms. Under iron, we endure, he whispered again. This time, it did not sound like a memory. It sounded like a promise. Aeroth had never known light brighter than its storms. For centuries, its skies had been iron gray, its people iron-willed. Now, for the first time in generations, fire bloomed across the horizon, not from destruction but from creation. The forges were alive again. Old mines that once dug for survival now thundered with purpose. Machines that had rusted in silence were torn from the ground, cleaned, rebuilt. The foundries screamed as molten steel poured into molds shaped like engines, armor plates, and the long sleeping hearts of warships. The people of Aeroth worked day and night, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. Every hammer strike echoed like thunder through the tunnels, a rhythm older than peace itself. Children watched as their parents relit the furnaces. They didn't fully understand, but they felt something new in the air, a hum of pride, a sense that the stories about their ancestors weren't just myths. Humanity was waking up. In the command center, Rian Holt stood before a holographic projection of the old Terran fleet schematics. Many of the ships were lost, dismantled, or half buried under iron dust. But the data was still there, stored in fragments, blueprints passed down like sacred texts. Captain Reese pointed at one of the models, a long predatory silhouette. The Resolute-class cruiser. We can rebuild 3 of them if we strip the transport bays. Power cores are stable enough. The engines will have to improvise. Rian nodded. Improvise is what humans do best. Engineer Dana Voss leaned over a terminal. We found old plasma coil housings in the southern scrapyards. They're corroded, but with new shielding they'll hold. And if they don't, they'll hold, Rian said simply. Voss smiled faintly. That's the commander I remember. Across the base, the aliens who had come seeking help watched the transformation with awe. To them, war was a nightmare. Something whispered about, never seen. But here, in these underground halls, it looked purposeful. Not mindless destruction, but determination forged into metal. Saren approached Rian one evening as he inspected the first completed armor frame. A towering exosuit painted matte black. The human emblem stamped on its chest, a broken chain forming a circle. You rebuild so quickly, Saren said quietly. It's like it's in your blood. Rian didn't look up. It is. We don't fight because we want to. We fight because no one else will when the darkness comes. He ran a hand over the armor's surface, feeling its cold weight. You called us dangerous. Maybe you were right. But danger isn't always evil. Sometimes it's the only thing that stands between life and extinction. Weeks turned into months. The Iron Fleet, that's what they called it, began to rise from the dust. 3 cruisers, 8 corvettes, dozens of smaller crafts, all forged from scavenged material and old designs. Their hulls gleamed darkly under Aeroth's dim sun, each one marked with the same inscription near the bridge, "We endure." The first launch drew every settler to the surface. Children sat on the dunes, faces lit by the glow of the engines as the Resolute lifted off in a storm of flame and dust. For a moment, even the iron clouds seemed to open, and sunlight, real, unfiltered sunlight, touched the moon for the first time in living memory. When the ship broke orbit, the crowd cheered. The sound rolled across the plains like thunder, raw and fierce. In orbit, the crew of the Resolute stood at their stations, men and women who had never left Aeroth, but carried centuries of soldiers' instinct. The consoles flickered to life, weapons hummed, and the old systems sang again. "Commander," Reese said through the comms, The Iron Fleet is operational. Rian watched from the command deck of the Vigilant, his own ship, as the fleet formed up behind him, dark silhouettes against the dying sun. Then let's see what's left of the galaxy, he said. Their first destination was the nearest Concord world, Tyrolin Prime, once a garden planet of oceans and glass towers. When they arrived, the sensors showed nothing alive. Orbit was littered with wrecks. Shattered habitats floated in silence, still glowing with the last energy flickers of civilian ships that never escaped. Below, the planet burned. Half its surface turned black, oceans boiled away. Saren watched from the viewport, her luminous skin dim with sorrow. "We tried to talk to them," she whispered. "The Verka sent no words, only fire." Rian stared down at the ruin. He'd seen enough death in the records of old wars, but this was different. This was extermination. He turned to Reese. "Any survivors?" Scanning, faint distress beacon, southern hemisphere, deep bunker. "Send 2 corvettes, secure and extract whoever's left." Within the hour the corvettes returned, bringing fewer than 50 survivors, mostly children. Their eyes were wide with terror, their thin hands clutching whatever they could carry. A small Val boy looked up at Rian as he stepped from the landing ramp. "Are you human?" he asked, trembling. Rian crouched, voice gentle. "Yes," the boy hesitated. "My teacher said humans were scary." Rian smiled faintly. "Your teacher was half right, but we're on your side now." That night the fleet's officers gathered in the Vigilance war room. Holographic displays mapped the spread of the Verka, a tide of red markers consuming the stars. "They're using subspace for movement," Voss explained. "They jump between systems using magnetic rifts. Every planet they hit, they drain for resources and move on. Nothing lives afterward." Reese frowned. "Can we intercept them?" "Maybe, if we find the pattern." Saren, exhausted, said softly, "Even if you do, there are billions of them. The Concord fleets couldn't last minutes." Rian looked at her. "The Concord didn't fight. They pleaded. There's a difference." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what he meant. He pointed to a cluster of stars on the display. "This system, Valen Reach, the Verka are moving there next. It's still inhabited. If we intercept them there, we can hit their forward swarm before it reaches the colonies." Reese hesitated. "That's suicide with our numbers." "Then we'll make it count," Rian said. "We show the galaxy that humans are not monsters. We're shields." He turned to the fleet map again. "Prepare for engagement. Under iron we endure." 3 days later, the Iron Fleet jumped into Valen Reach. Space unfolded into a battlefield. The Verka ships were vast, like floating fortresses made of molten metal and dark energy. They moved with eerie silence, no communication, no warning, only purpose. Rian's fleet was a fraction of their size. But when the Verka turned toward them, the humans opened fire. The Vigilant's main cannons roared, lances of blue plasma cutting across the void. The cruisers followed, missiles streaking like meteors. The first barrage tore through the nearest enemy vessel, a sphere of red light that cracked apart and exploded into molten fragments. For a moment, silence. Then the rest of the swarm awakened. Dozens of Verka warships turned, engines igniting with crimson light. Their counterattack hit like a storm. Shields flared, decks trembled, and alarms screamed. "Forward guns! Keep pressure," Rian barked. "Don't let them regroup." The Resolute took a direct hit, half its hull torn away, but still fired until its core went dark. The Vigilant's armor melted under plasma fire, but the crew held their ground. Every ship fought until it burned. Saren watched from the observation deck, shaking. "They're outnumbered 10-1. 10-1 is fair odds for humans," Reese said grimly, gripping the controls. Then the impossible happened. One Verka battleship broke formation and exploded from within. Human boarding parties had breached it. Marines in heavy suits, fighting through corridors of molten metal, planting fusion charges as they went. Through the comms came their battle cry. For the living, for the lost, for the iron sky. The explosion ripped through the swarm, scattering their formation. The humans pressed the advantage, driving forward through the wreckage. When the smoke cleared hours later, the Iron Fleet was in ruins, but alive. 4 ships remained. Half their weapons were gone. But the Verkha armada had withdrawn. For the first time in the invasion, the enemy had retreated. Across the comm channels of the surviving Concord worlds, a single message echoed. The humans are fighting. The humans are winning. And somewhere across 1,000 frightened worlds, hope flickered again. The Battle of Valen Reach became a whisper that turned into a roar. At first few believed it, that the humans, the exiled savages of Aroth, had stood against the Verkha, and lived. But the evidence was undeniable. The wreckage of burning Dominion ships drifting in orbit, the survivor transmissions, and the simple clear message that had echoed across the void. Under iron, we endure. Across the fractured Concord, worlds in hiding began to listen again. The very name human, once a curse, a warning, became a spark of hope. But for Rian Holt and his fleet, victory had come at a terrible cost. The Resolute was gone. Half the crews of the Vigilant and Hammerfall were lost. The surviving ships limped through subspace, hulls bleeding radiation, engines failing one by one. The medbays overflowed with wounded, men and women held together by gauze, grit, and willpower. Rian hadn't slept in 2 days. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with soot. Yet when he walked the decks, the crew stood taller. They drew strength from his presence. Not because he shouted orders, but because he moved with the quiet certainty of someone who refused to break. In the dim light of the command bridge, Saren approached him. She had changed, too. The fear in her eyes was replaced by something new, respect and a kind of awe. "You should rest," she said softly. Rian gave a faint smile. "When the fleet rests, I rest." She looked out the viewport, where stars drifted slowly past. "I never understood how you could fight like this. The Verkha are machines of war, and yet you faced them with courage." Rian's voice was low. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's what you do while you're terrified." Saren turned to him. "You could have stayed in exile. You could have let the galaxy burn." He didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly, "We tried peace once. We tried staying out of the way. But hiding while others die, that's not peace. That's cowardice wearing a mask of morality." He walked closer to the viewport, eyes on the stars. "If humanity stands again, it will be for something greater than revenge. We'll show the galaxy that peace survives only when there are those willing to defend it." Weeks passed. Repairs were slow, resources scarce. But every day brought new signals, messages from distant colonies, small ships carrying supplies, engineers, even volunteers. They came from species who had once hated humanity: Kellor, Thal, Voxel, and others. Some brought weapons scavenged from ruins, others brought food, fuel, or information. They came because they had seen what humans could do when the galaxy's laws of peace had failed. For the first time in centuries, the stars began to unite, not under fear but under the protection of the exiled. A new fleet began to take shape around Aroth. It was larger now, stronger, a mixture of human engineering and alien technology. Ships of every design bore the same emblem, the Circle of the Broken Chain. The Iron Sky Alliance, they called it. But the Verkha were not idle. Their defeat at Valen Reach had awakened something ancient within them. A tactical mind, a cold logic that adapted. They began to move differently, more strategically, targeting communication hubs, fuel routes, and colonies that joined the humans. They learned. When the first Allied convoy vanished without a trace, Rian knew what was coming. The Dominion was preparing for a final strike. Inside the Vigilant, the War Council gathered. Rian, Saren, Reese, Dana Voss, and the new representatives of the Allied worlds. The air was tense, the room heavy with exhaustion and resolve. Dana pulled up a projection of the Verkha movements. Red lines spread across half the map. "They're converging here," she said, pointing at a cluster of stars. "The Aroth system. They're coming for us." Silence filled the room. Reese exhaled slowly. "They're cutting off the head." Saren looked up, voice trembling. "They mean to erase you." Rian's expression didn't change. "Then they'll find out what happens when they try." He straightened. "Transmit to all fleets. Tell them to fall back to Aroth. Every ship, every pilot, every fighter that still breathes, we make our stand here." Reese frowned. "Commander, that's—" "I know," Rian interrupted gently. "It's suicide. but it's also the only chance anyone has left. He looked around the room, meeting every eye. We're not just fighting for humans now, we're fighting for everyone, whoever wanted to live free. If we fall, the galaxy falls. If we endure, the galaxy endures. Saren bowed her head, voice soft. Then let us endure together. The Iron Moon became a fortress. Every crater turned into a gun battery. Every mine became a hangar. The forges burned day and night, turning raw ore into armor plates, weapons, and drones. Civilians took up tools and trained to fight. Children carried messages, repaired machinery, cooked for the soldiers. Aeroth, once the graveyard of humanity, had become the beating heart of resistance. And above it, in orbit, the Iron Fleet assembled one last time. Hundreds of ships, human and alien alike, circling the moon like guardians of legend. When the Verka came, they came in silence. A black tide stretching across the stars, hundreds of colossal ships blotting out the light. The void, filled with crimson glare as their weapons charged. Rian stood on the bridge of the Vigilant, hands clasped behind his back, eyes on the storm. Open a channel to all ships. The comms officer nodded. The connection went live. Hundreds of captains, thousands of soldiers, millions of hearts waiting. Rian's voice echoed through every speaker, every headset, every soul. This is Commander Rian Holt of Aeroth. 3 centuries ago they called us monsters. They cast us into the dark, and maybe we were monsters once, monsters that refused to kneel. But today we are the shield that stands between life and extinction. We fight not to conquer, but to protect, not for vengeance, but for hope. They will break upon us like waves against stone. And when the last shot is fired, the galaxy will remember that humanity did not fade. Under iron, we endure. When the transmission ended, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Then the first shot was fired. The sky exploded. The battle for Aeroth was beyond comprehension. Every inch of space became fire. The Iron Fleet clashed with the Dominion in brutal close-range combat. Railguns tearing through armor. Plasma arcs ripping across the dark. Ships collided, detonated, fell burning into the moon's atmosphere. The Verka unleashed their superweapon, a beam of molten energy that sliced through entire formations. 3 Allied cruisers vanished in an instant, but the humans didn't retreat. They couldn't. On the surface, gun batteries pounded the enemy. Soldiers in powered armor swarmed out of bunkers, engaging landed warforms, towering machines of metal and rage. Explosions shook the ground. The sky burned red. Rian's voice came over every channel. Hold the line, no retreat. His ship, the Vigilant, led the charge directly into the heart of the Verka fleet. The bridge shook violently. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Race shouted over the noise. Shields failing, reactors unstable. Then let's make it count, Rian said calmly. He locked the ship's course straight toward the Dominion flagship, a colossal construct the size of a small moon pulsing with molten veins. As the Vigilant accelerated, the crew braced for impact. Through the comms, Rian's voice was steady. Tell the galaxy we stood our ground. The Vigilant struck the enemy flagship head-on. For a blinding instant, the stars turned white. The explosion tore through the Dominion formation, rupturing their core drives. One after another, their ships disintegrated, the chain reaction spreading like fire through dry grass. The sky above Aeroth became a storm of falling light. When the smoke cleared, the Dominion was gone. The Iron Fleet was shattered, but victorious. On the surface, Saren stood among the survivors, watching the wreckage fall like burning rain. She held a small communicator in her hands, Rian's final transmission replaying in fragments. Under iron, we endure. She looked up at the iron sky, tears tracing through the dust on her face. Around her, soldiers, human and alien alike, began to chant the words softly, then louder until it became a roar that rolled across the plains like thunder. Under iron, we endure. And in that moment, the galaxy changed forever. No longer did they call humans monsters. They called them saviors. They called them the iron sky. The void screamed with light and fire. The Verka Armada poured from the rift like a storm of molten stars. ships the size of continents, alive with writhing metal tendrils and blazing cores, filled the system. They devoured energy, drank radiation, and moved with terrifying purpose. Their leading ship, the colossal dread Crucible, cast a shadow that swallowed moons. And waiting before them, under the gray light of Aeroth's dying sun, was the human fleet. It was small. A few dozen warships built from scrap, refitted with brutal precision. But their formation was perfect. Each hull bore the mark of Earth's foe. Rotten flags. Engines roared with old fury. Their signal filled the void on every frequency, a simple human voice repeating one phrase across the stars. "This is humanity. You will not pass." The Verka answered with silence. Then the stars erupted. Bolts of plasma carved through space. Shockwaves rippled across the void. The first human ships were torn apart instantly, their crews vaporized. But not one vessel broke formation. The command ship Resolute, with Commander Rian Holt at its core, dove forward through the chaos. "Evasive pattern Delta," Rian shouted. "All ships converge on the Crucible. They take energy, so starve them." The fleet obeyed, their movements sharp and unified. The human ships dimmed their reactors, cutting off emissions to confuse the enemy. Without fresh energy signatures to feed on, the Verka momentarily hesitated. That was all humanity needed. Fire rail batteries. Tungsten slugs accelerated by magnetic rails tore through the dark like divine thunder. The impacts shattered smaller Verka ships, splitting their glowing cores. One human frigate slammed directly into a Dominion destroyer, detonating its reactor point blank. The explosion lit the void like dawn. On the command bridge, Rian's crew moved with mechanical focus. No panic, no shouting, just grim precision. The younger officers, children of the exile generation, fought with a calm that bordered on holy. "We're losing the left flank," someone called. "The Guardian is down." "Mark their sacrifice," Rian said quietly, "then make it count." He opened a secure channel, not to his fleet, but to the Concord observers orbiting far behind the battle. Their ships trembled at the edges of the fight, too fragile to join, too afraid to flee. "This is Commander Holt of Aeroth," he said, his voice carrying through static and fire. "You wanted peace without defenders. You thought strength was a sin. Look well now and understand peace survives only when someone stands ready to bleed for it." The channel stayed silent, but across a dozen worlds, alien leaders watched and wept. The Verka dread Crucible loomed ahead, a mountain of molten steel and claws, its main cannon charged, aiming straight for Resolute. The energy spike made sensors scream, "Brace!" The beam fired, a sun-bright column that split the void. It hit Resolute dead center. Hull plates peeled away, alarms howled and fire swept the command deck. Half the crew was gone in seconds. Rian dragged himself up, blood on his face, vision blurred by smoke. "Status. Reactors breached, containment failing." He looked out at the burning stars, at the dying ships that still fought, still held the line. "How many of ours left?" "Less than 10. Rian nodded once. "Then we finish this." He keyed the comm. "All remaining ships, form on Resolute. We're taking the Crucible down." "Sir." "That's an order." Outside, the remnants of the human fleet gathered, their hulls battered and smoking. The Verka closed in, a sea of living metal ready to consume them. But the humans didn't retreat. Instead, they accelerated toward the heart of the enemy armada. The Concord observers watched in stunned silence as the human ships plunged straight into the fire. Rian turned to his helmsman. "Bring us in close, ram distance." The young officer hesitated. "Sir, I know." He smiled faintly. "Under iron we endure." The Resolute's engines flared to white heat. The dying reactor surged, flooding the systems with power. The ship screamed through the void, its hull melting, its shields gone. The dread Crucible fired again, but Rian's ship was already too close. He opened the comm one last time. "To all who hear this, remember humanity not for what we destroyed, but for what we defended. Remember that peace exists because someone stood beneath the iron sky and refused to kneel." The Resolute hit the dread Crucible dead center. For a heartbeat, The galaxy held its breath. Then the explosion came, a silent, beautiful sunrise across the black. The dread crucible's core imploded, taking the rest of the Verka fleet with it. The shockwave rippled for light minutes, scattering the invaders and sealing the rift that had birthed them. When the light faded, only fragments of the human fleet remained, drifting embers against the stars. The Concord ships moved in cautiously, their sensors reading radiation and debris. No life signs, just wreckage, and one faint repeating signal: under iron, we endure. Weeks later, across the galaxy, the war was over. The Verka were gone, the rift sealed, and the Concord, humbled, grieving, wiser, gathered on Aeroth. They rebuilt the human monuments. They spoke the names of those who had died. They promised never again to call strength a curse. On the moon's iron plains, where the wind still howled, the aliens raised a single statue, a tall, armored figure staring at the storming sky. The inscription was simple. They fought not for conquest, but for peace. Under iron, they endured. And though humanity was gone from the stars once more, their legacy was not. Centuries later, when new wars came, when new threats rose, and when fear whispered again across the void, the young races remembered. They built fleets not of gold but of steel. They trained warriors who swore an ancient oath: under iron we endure. And in the echoes of those words, humanity lived forever.